private members club before, Giles?
No.
10 a.m. on a Tuesday is not normally when I'd be heading to an exclusive members club.
Hi, Atem.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, Giles.
Giles, pleasure, buddy.
We weren't here to schmooze and sip cocktails, but to meet Atem, a self-made businessman.
Do you want a coffee?
Oh, yes, please.
On the surface, everything looks great. But Atem's struggling with a secret.
I was so skinny. It was the stress of the job. I think that's where I really got into, I truly understood what imposter syndrome is about.
How does it feel to you?
I would say an immense amount of self-doubt. And it just keeps pouring in. Copious amounts.
This week, I'm helping Atem come to terms with something that will be familiar to many. Imposter syndrome. Welcome to Money Confidential with me, Katie Morley. Each episode, I tour the country to hear directly from you, lifting the curtain on real-life dramas and delving into stories of financial deception, disputes, and strained relationships. Today, Atem is a successful entrepreneur. He created his own inclusive marketing business from scratch. Although his company is doing very well, he's struggling to break through the £1 million turnover mark. But there might be more lurking beneath the surface. I met Atem to discuss what's holding him back.
I was born in Cameroon, and I was fortunate to be born in a family of high achievers. My father was a diplomat, and my mom ran an engineering business at the same time as well. My dad was posted to the UK when I was 15, but I very quickly adapted to society in the UK. But also coming from my background forced me to be quite competitive.
Do you have any particular memories of feeling really competitive in childhood?
I think the competitiveness came out when my parents, playing around this social experiment, they decided to put my two older brothers in private education and boarding. And then myself and my younger brother went to state schools. And so naturally, there was already this natural divide between myself and my younger brother and my two older brothers.
Why was that decision made then?
I think my father was very much in favor of private education, and my mom wasn't.
So they thought it was in two and two?
Yeah, exactly. So they decided okay, the first two, you guys go, and then the second two, no. And yeah, that was horrible. That was really bad. And I think...
Is there any resentment there?
No, at the time, yes. At the time as a kid, you don't really understand what's going on, but you just kind of think that, your brother's privileged and then everything goes to them and da-da-da. And also being the kind of so-called middle child, I think there is something to it as well. There's a sense of wanting to be seen, to be heard, and to prove yourself.
Did you feel you were having to sort of fight harder to achieve?
Yes.
Being at the state school?
I did, very much so. I felt that things came very easy to my older brothers. And myself and my younger brother, we always fought for things. So that competitiveness was...
And now you're all grown men. Yes. What's the situation with how you've all turned out?
That's a good question. What's the situation? I like to think that I've prevailed. I've won.
You've won?
I think. I don't think I have, but no. Right now, we're so much more, we're much closer than we've ever been.
After graduating, Atem built a successful marketing career before going on to create his own company. He says he's on the cusp of turning over £1 million a year, but he feels like something's holding him back. I asked him what he thinks it might be.
I'm still struggling with that, to be honest. I don't know what it is. I think I have this mental block, and sometimes I ask myself, do I deserve this?
Why would you feel like you didn't deserve something?
I think it's a very difficult one. So there aren't that many individuals from my background that run a marketing and advertising agency in the UK specifically. And so it's very difficult for me to find someone that I can connect with, or that has the same sort of journey that I've had. That's the first thing. And then there's the other things from my childhood, growing up in a family where you're constantly being pushed and told that your best efforts isn't good enough and you need to step up and do that little bit more. And you need to do more and more and more. If you got an A, the question would be, why didn't you get an A star?
Have you spoken to them about this subsequently, that you felt under a lot of pressure to perform as a child?
No. I haven't yet worked up the courage to have that conversation.
How do you think they would react if you did?
I think my parents will probably, or my mom, because my dad's no longer with us, but my mom will probably say, well, we never put you under pressure. We just pushed you, and we thought that you could do better.
But there's obviously something unresolved in there that you feel now could be holding you back from reaching the next level.
There's an aspect of that, definitely. And there's also an aspect of, we are at a point where we're seeing consistent work, ebbs and flows sometimes. I don't know what else I could do to improve the revenue of the company. And sometimes I would say to myself, well, it's the economy, it's the current economic climate that we're in. And at other times I would think to myself, if it is the economic climate, why are other people doing better or improving when it comes to revenue and sales for the company? So what is it that we're not seeing? What is it that I'm not seeing for the agency?
And like, aside from me now, who are you talking to about this? Are you sharing it with someone?
No, I probably do need to find people to talk to. I did speak to friends and sometimes family, but I don't have someone specifically that I can sit down and say, well, like, what's going on?
Do you kind of feel emotionally supported at the moment? Do you have any emotional support?
No, I don't.
And what about in childhood? Did you feel that you, because I know you said you felt academically pushed, did you also feel emotionally supported then?
No.
No. And do you think that may be sort of feeding into something?
Perhaps. I think you probably uncovered something there, which is, I've always had to rely on myself emotionally. I've always had to, whenever I'm faced with any kind of obstacle, I retreat within myself to find that fire which would push me through the obstacle and difficult times.
You must be a very resilient person.
I would like to think so, but I can tell you that it's quite lonely sometimes. And it's also affected a lot of my personal relationships as well, because I'm not as open as I would.
In what way?
In like my previous partners have always mentioned, one of the biggest issues with me is the fact that whenever I'm faced with something, I don't open up.
Okay, so you find it hard to let people in.
Yes.
On a deep level.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Because most of the time I've been able to, so put it this way, my parents split when I was, I think, about 10, 11.
Oh, okay, so that must have been a life-defining.
Yes, that was a massive life-defining moment for me. And at that point, I just retreated. And that way of coping with it was, I'm just going to be the best in what I do. I'm just going to push myself, and material and financial success is what's going to heal me.
But have you found that to be the case?
Absolutely not. But it's very difficult to break out of that habit.
Before setting up his own agency, Atem worked for a global marketing business, which is where he first experienced imposter syndrome. Despite being in the top position, he faced resentment from those working under him, and before long, the stress started to take its toll.
I was so skinny. It was the stress of the job. I think that's where I really got into, I truly understood what imposter syndrome is about. And I came into a company that was underperforming. I was given the task to turn this around. I had a senior leadership team that did not believe in me, that were constantly questioning my decision-making process, constantly questioning my ability, and constantly fighting against what you're trying to do. It's very difficult to navigate a space that you clearly know you're not wanted, but you have to deliver. It's obvious, people are making it very obvious that they don't want you there. they should have got the job instead of you, but you have to work with them.
Your version of imposter syndrome, like in like a one sentence, how does it feel to you?
I would say an immense amount of self-doubt, and it just keeps pouring in, copious amounts.
And when do you feel that? Is it when you're at work or when you go home or when you go to bed at night, or is it all the time?
It starts with when you step into the environment, but you tend to take your work home, and before you know it, it takes over your entire life. So you've got this huge amount of self-doubt, and then you sprinkle that with anxiety and a constant negativity in terms of comments and things that are happening. It's a recipe for disaster. So all of that was a lot. I don't know how I survived, but I'm glad that I did. But I think I spent a lot of time working out, which is my way of de-stressing. But I also was always reminding myself that you made this choice, and so you've got to deal with it, and you have to come out the other end on top.
But you're still having these feelings now.
So these feelings now are far less now. But there's situations that I find myself and I have to question, okay, am I doing the right thing?
Yeah.
Have I made the right decision? Yeah. And I'm overthinking things rather than being instinctive. And particularly when we hit the end of the financial year, and I'm just like, why are we either a few £1,000 less or a few £1,000 above what we did before? Do I need to just step away and have someone else take over?
Do you honestly have that thought?
Yeah, I do.
That someone else would be better running your business?
Perhaps, yes, I do. Honestly, I do. I don't know what it is. I don't know what this mental block is.
If you were to hazard a guess, what would be your best guess as to what is going on here?
I think honestly it's fear. I think that's what's going on.
Fear of what?
Fear of not achieving it.
Like letting yourself?
Yes.
Letting your parents down?
Yes.
Both?
But letting myself down, letting my parents down. Will my parents approve? Will my dad be proud? Have I done the most I can? And yeah, I think fundamentally I would ascribe it to being afraid.
I found speaking to Atem quite moving. Most of us are likely to feel imposter syndrome or feelings of inadequacy at some point in our lives. But it seems like Atem lacks a support system to deal with these difficult feelings. I want to help him address these problems head on and achieve the financial success that, deep down, he knows he's capable of. I'd like to hear from you. Have you been plagued with thoughts of self-doubt? Did it hold you back in life? Have you got any advice for Atem? Email me on moneyconfidential@telegraph.co.uk or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. The number is in the podcast description. In last week's episode, I spoke to Catherine about her fear of dying and how she was struggling to draw up a will. Well, we've had an incredible response with tons of you emailing in with lots of support and advice for Catherine. People seemed collectively supportive of Catherine leaving money to some type of charity. Ian suggests that Catherine, who is a nurse, invites members of a nursing association to tell her why they feel that they, or a nurse that they know, deserves to inherit, and then leaving it to the 4 most worthy people. What a fantastic idea. Kath says Catherine could look at local groups who need resources, and then they can dedicate their new items to her memory. Or she could leave the group specific items rather than just money, which she's worried will get squandered, and then they would be most grateful, and it means that she leaves a memory of herself for local people. Great idea as well. On a future episode, we hope to include way more of your opinions on all of these topics. After the break, we speak to psychologist Professor Amy Edmondson about imposter syndrome and fear of failure. Back shortly. Welcome back to Money Confidential with me, Katie Morley. Atem's self-doubt and imposter syndrome seems to be motivated by a fear of failure. I thought who better to bring into the conversation than Professor Amy Edmondson from Harvard Business School. She's the author of the best-selling Right Kind of Wrong, The Science of Failing Well. I asked her what failure means exactly and how it relates to Atem's situation.
Well, I define failure as an undesired outcome. And there are failures we should be very afraid of. Right? We should be afraid to, be hit by a speeding bus in the middle of the street. Right? We should not be afraid of talking honestly and openly with each other. We should be willing to let down our guard. So we need to distinguish between productive fears, running into a burning building, right, and unproductive fears. Well, I don't want to speak up because someone might think I'm an idiot if I say that, and it's wrong. Unproductive because it limits your learning, and it may, in fact, limit your ability to help somebody because the idea you had would have been, in fact, a very important one.
So would you class his fear of not reaching the £1 million turnover mark as an unproductive fear?
Unproductive fear, because it quite literally doesn't help and it could hurt.
So how can he deal better with this fear?
Stop, challenge, choose, right? Take a look at it, pause. Why am I afraid? Well, could be the answer he might find inside himself is that people will think I'm worthless. Okay, well, how true is that really? If I don't meet this particular milestone by this particular time or ever, that the people in the community will stop what they're doing and come to the conclusion he's worthless. It's actually ridiculous, right? It won't happen.
But you must see this kind of behaviour and feeling at all levels of business.
Yeah.
You must be seeing multi-billionaires that think they're not good enough as well.
You bet. And it's not, strictly speaking, healthy. Right? And it's certainly not a source of joy. It's an aspect of maturity and wisdom to keep working on ourselves and to keep working on getting our spontaneous thinking to be closer to useful, productive, healthy, rational thinking. We won't get there overnight. Most of us will never fully arrive at that point of wisdom, but we might as well keep working at it while we're here.
And do you think there's something about people who are particularly successful that makes them more susceptible to this negative self-talk and imposter syndrome and fear of failure?
It seems to me that the answer is yes. I'm, after all, a professor at Harvard, and Harvard is a place beset by imposter syndrome. It's an overly large portion of the admitted students or the hired faculty have that deep worry that, well, I was the admissions mistake or I was the hiring mistake. And one of these days I'm going to be caught out. Well, that's, again, unhealthy, very human, but ultimately not an enjoyable way to live.
I kind of wanted to take a step back and get into some of his childhood issues that he mentioned. I felt he was very brave to put those on the table for us to look at, because it seems like he doesn't often get into this with his friends, family and colleagues. It's quite a private thing for him. He talks about kind of being overpushed academically as a child at the same time as not being emotionally supported. How can that kind of manifest in feelings of failure and imposter syndrome and all the things that he's describing?
One school of thought is quite interested in what's called attachment theory. And when children feel insufficient attachment to, or even safety and support with the adults in their life, it can create these kinds of syndromes and fears and challenges and insecurities throughout their adult life.
I think the most poignant quote from his interview was, "Whenever I'm faced with any kind of obstacle, I retreat within myself to find that fire which would push me through the obstacle and difficult times." Is it a good thing that he's finding the fire from within? Or, should he be finding the fire from others as well?
I'm going to answer yes. Yes, it's a good thing to find fire, resilience, grit, what have you, within. And yes, it is a good thing to get support from friends, colleagues, family members, and occasionally even professionals. It's one of those aspects of life that you have to do it yourself, but you can't do it alone. or you're best not doing it alone.
How can he change that and open up better to his colleagues and associates?
Well, perhaps he's already taken the first step. Right? By opening up to you, he has spoken openly and he has realized, oh, right, I didn't get hit by lightning. No, nothing terrible happened as a result of that honesty. And that, I believe, is an experience that many people have.
Yeah.
You usually find support, connection, and love that you never knew existed.
I think it's interesting that some of these feelings are coming when he seems to be on the cusp of a major milestone achievement, which to him is the £1 million turnover. Is that normal to have these feelings arise, when you're trying to do something quite big?
I think so. For anyone who has been ambitious and goal-driven in their lives, there are often a series of important milestones and achievement that one has their sights on and feels anxious that it might not come to be. But then once it does, it can be a letdown. Because in a way, you've put too much of your emotional life in that external objective outcome and mistakenly believed that will solve everything. And suddenly I will feel happy and good all the time. And of course, that doesn't happen.
He said he feels he doesn't deserve success and that sometimes he thinks somebody else might be better running his business, which sounded absurd to me.
Well, on the one hand, it is absurd and patently untrue because there he is running his business successfully. On the other hand, it's a very human experience and a very widespread experience. And I think imposter syndrome is unhealthy and painful. And it also has a lovely element of humility in it, right? That recognition that just because I've had this success doesn't mean I'm the big cheese, doesn't mean I'm better than others or more deserving. It means I'm a fallible human being who has worked hard and achieved some success. And that's a good thing. It's in many ways the people who at least appear to be more confident than their accomplishments sort of signify they should are more problematic in many ways in society.
What do you see as ways that he could move forward with positivity here?
Well, step one is always to name the issue. That always leads to better insight and, more importantly, better connection, better relationships. So it's the loneliness that needs to be driven out. And I believe he's taken that first step.
Yeah.
Once you start talking about this, you are guaranteed to run into someone else who's going to say, oh, you too? I always have those experiences and they do get me down. And oftentimes our self-talk is, we say things to ourselves we would never say to a friend or a colleague or even a stranger. So what is the impact of that cruelty to ourselves that is unintended? And I think it's material. And so the path forward involves being more willing to reach out. And this will not be a difficult act because when you do it just a little bit, you get positive reinforcement. You can always ask yourself, is this way of thinking helping me achieve my goals, helping me feel the way I want to feel? And if the answer is no, you must change the thinking.
And do you have any kind of practical tips to help him do that?
Yes. I'm going to recommend the brilliant work of a physician called Dr. Maxie Maltzby, who was a champion of rational behavior therapy. And his great contribution to the field of cognitive behavior therapy was that you can do this for yourself. He introduced his sort of healthy thinking habits. Stop, challenge, and choose. Stop means just pause. When you notice yourself having those bad emotions and feeling scared and feeling anxious, just force yourself to take a deep breath and insert a pause. And then take a look at how you're thinking about the situation. Well, this isn't going to work out. I'm a fraud, whatever. And challenge those thoughts. How rational are they? Not very? Okay. Then choose a more accurate and more healthy way to think about the same exact situation and choose that and move forward.
And what else do we see on his path forward?
He needs a network of people who are there to support each other, to share war stories with each other.
Because it's a two-way street, isn't it?
It's a two-way street, right?
Yeah.
I think the acts of giving are every bit as important as the acts of receiving support, because by giving support, you're sort of practicing that muscle and you're learning what it looks like, and you hear yourself saying things to a friend and you're sincere, and then you realize, well, wait a minute, maybe some of that's true for me too.
What do you think of CBT? Could that be helpful to him?
Oh, I'm a strong fan of CBT. As a social psychologist, I am well aware of the funny reality that we as humans, we think that the events in our lives cause us to feel certain ways. It's not true. The events in our lives trigger thinking that causes us to feel certain ways. Let me then just add that he is to be commended and congratulated for all his successes. I mean, he has worked hard and he deserves the success he has gotten. I'm always uncomfortable, and I guess he is too, with the word deserve, because I think if we equate the word deserve is we get something that others don't. You can do your best, and your best is good enough to get results along the way. And then please take the time to enjoy them. It doesn't make you a bad person. And in fact, it makes you a grateful person. And a grateful person is a more happy person.
And that might be the best advice of the day. Enjoy it, Atem.
Yes.
You've earned it.
Yes, you have earned it. And you have a perfect right to be here.
Many thanks to Amy Edmondson, Professor of Leadership and Management at Harvard Business School. Do you relate to Atem's story? Do you have any advice for how he could move forward? Email me at moneyconfidential@telegraph.co.uk or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. The number is in the podcast description. Well, we've had more responses to last week's episode about Catherine, who is struggling to decide who to leave her money to. One anonymous listener writes, I was very sick throughout all of my high-earning working years and yet still managed to work as I had no family or partner to support me once I divorced my husband. I plan to leave all my money and belongings to relevant charities. Gosh, that sounds like it would have been really tough. And on a different note, Anne says that Catherine should look at death as an adventure. She believes there are thousands of near-death experiences that show that you are welcomed into the afterlife. Well, I suppose that's one way to look at it. Now, back to Atem and his dilemma. I wanted to speak to somebody in the advertising business who could offer a few pearls of wisdom. A warm welcome to Trevor Robinson, OBE, creative director and founder of Quiet Storm and Create Not Hate. Trevor has a decades-long advertising career and was propelled to success in the 90s after directing the famous You've Been Tangoed ads. I asked Trevor what he made of Atem's story.
There's some real similarities to when I first started off. I think they call it imposter syndrome. I really had a lot when I first came into the industry, but mainly because the industry wasn't like me at all. And there wasn't very few people that I could look around that I could walk up to and go, oh, he's like me. And he's gone through the similar things that I've been through.
And when you say that, are you talking about the colour of your skin or something else?
Yeah, both really. Colour of your skin, your background, your education. You know, I'd be in a room with Oxford grads and Cambridge grads, and everybody looked and sounded a lot smarter than me, and I was intimidated by that, and it took me a while to fall back on something that I've always known. If I get into the industry, they might be different from me, but the uniqueness, which is me, is going to stand out in this industry. It's going to be a real ace in the back pocket. And I've kind of go in there with this knowledge and this background, is these insights, and this, even my sense of humor, I knew was completely different. And then using those differences to stand out and those differences to be remembered.
You said that you did go through some similar feelings. How did you kind of overcome those feelings in order to let yourself be purely you?
I really felt it the first time when I went to college. And I remember feeling that a lot of these guys had parents that had been in the industry. And I felt, right, if I'm going to compete here, I'm going to have to really not just be as good as the people in the room. I got to be as good as people in other colleges, in other spaces. Some of the biggest highs I've ever got was I remember going to a cinema to watch a film, and then one of my commercials came up for Apple Tango, and the whole audience everybody's just laughing at the ad and just like applauding as when it came up. And I was just like, oh my God, it blew me away. I kind of learned a lot from finding out my worth and finding out the key thing is what makes me happy and what don't I want to be in my career.
When you listen to Atem's, situation where he currently is now, he's 40, he's done really well, but he's kind of like nearing this milestone where his business is turning over nearly £1 million, but he feels he can't get to the other side of that milestone and he really, really wants to. Did you ever sort of have a situation like that where you're just like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I get to the next level? I'm frustrated.
Constantly, still am. I think there's always someone doing better than you. There's always someone, selling their business for 20 million. And if you start looking at that, you stop, I think, achieving. Yes, you can learn from other people. Yes, there's things that you can implement within your business, but you got to stay on the path. You've got to also look at what you're doing that's doing great and continue doing this. Success can happen at any time, really. And he's kind of halfway there. Do you know what I mean? He's doing something right already. And it can seem a bit like doors are being slammed, but there's always doors that's being opened. If you keep going for it, if you keep putting yourself in the game, you've got a good chance of achieving. And I'm nearly everything I've always wanted to achieve. It's happened through time. It's happened. I've never cared about money. I just always wanted to do something that what I do has worth, and what I do within my friends, family, I have worth.
But are you saying that maybe if he starts focusing on the business and what he's trying to achieve with the business and not thinking about the money, maybe the money will just come?
I think so. I've always looked at what am I doing? What am I delivering my clients? What am I delivering my staff? And I think if it's less about, here's the figures that I want to achieve, here's the money that I want to achieve. And I think it's more rewarding, to be honest.
So my thing is I win money back for other people.
Yeah.
So, and I kind of chart that on a publicly available chart. But when I came back from maternity leave, I was a bit low in confidence, I don't mind admitting. And I sort of said to myself, look, I'm not going to try focus on the money. I'm just going to focus on the stories and helping people and doing the best that I can for the readers. And because I didn't focus on the money, I actually had my record-breaking year that year.
Yeah.
And it was kind of without trying. And I don't know why, I can't explain that, but it just happened.
Like you said, stop trying to look at the financial things and the weight of finances, because that never feels like you succeed there. And look, start with your family. Are you giving them a good life? Are you being the best father that you can be? Are you being the best friend that you can be? And I think things blossom from that.
Atem's been really open with us and really respectful that he's done that. And one of the things that really struck me in his interview is that he said that whenever he's faced with any kind of obstacle in business, he retreats within himself to find that fire which pushes him through the obstacle and the difficult times. And he's admitted that at times he's quite lonely. He says he kind of struggles with relationships because, he gets to a point where he needs to open up, but he struggles to do so. What's your advice to him there?
I'm really lucky because I've always had someone to confide in. But I do believe he can look at his friends. He can look at his family, have that dialogue, be open. Don't take it all inside and the burden on yourself. And it will feel a lot lighter. Talk to your old bosses. I often go out with my old bosses and we just go out, I'll take them for a drink and we just chat. And it is like you realize how much of the stuff I'm going through now, they were going through.
He has this fear around failure and opening up about failure because he talks about this competitive nature that's maybe been ingrained into him from a young age. And there's something holding him back from going out with his, colleague or associate or mate and saying mate, I feel like I'm failing. How can he get over that?
I think sometimes you have to stand back and go, I'm going to take some knocks. I'm going to take some times when I'm going to be not as competitively strong as I possibly can. But if I'm enjoying the process, and you've got to learn to enjoy the process and enjoy the victories and even enjoy the failures and be able to laugh about it. And It's taken me a long time to be able to do that successfully, but I think I've always been resilient, and he has to learn to it's not always about winning. It's about the journey.
In your journey so far, what would you say has been your biggest failure as well? And how did you overcome that?
I think the biggest failure is always when you're rejected, when you get fired. And I got fired twice from my first company that I first went in. And the boss was really lovely to me, but he just sort of like said, look, I know you're working on your portfolio at night times and using our stuff to do that. I'm going to have to let you go. I'm going to give you some money. You can set off into the world. And he goes, I'm doing this for you. And I think now I can see it. But at the time, I was just like, my God, that was hard. To be honest, it just fuels you, makes you stronger. I always felt I can't fail as much as I did back then. I've reached a stage now. If my business goes on, I know I can get a job tomorrow. I know that I can do lots of different stuff. And if anything, it opens up doors for me to try things that I've not done before. And I've got that resilience now that I never had back then.
But if you were having a coffee with Atem and you were, he'd come to you as a sort of mentor, what would your advice be to him?
So I would like to believe I can say words of encouragement to him. And I can only really gauge it when I would meet him, and then I'll speak from the heart. Because it just sounds like platitude. It can just sounds like, oh yeah, it's easy for you to say that, mate. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I would hope that I could say something that could register and he could kind of feel invigorated and ready for the world.
Sounds like he might want to expand his business network. How do you think would be the best way to go about that?
If he wants to expand, he needs to, my wife is really good at this. She's always meeting people, entrepreneurial people, and getting advice from them. People that have had success in expanding their companies and worldwide and all that. I think you need to have a dialogue with all those people and be open to everything.
So maybe Atem's got to be true to his own style and his way of doing business.
Exactly. Find out who he is. Talk to as many people as possible. And actually, just talking to people, you realize who you are.
Thanks again to Trevor Robinson, OBE. Atem's problem is one that will probably be familiar to many people, and I hope the advice we've given him has been helpful. Join me next week as we'll be talking to etiquette expert William Hanson about a very juicy friendship money dilemma from one of our listeners. You won't want to miss this one. Is there something you want to get off your chest? Email me at moneyconfidential@telegraph.co.uk or fill in the form via the link below. It takes about 60 seconds and can be totally anonymous. Thank you for listening to Money Confidential. Please do help grow the show by rating on your podcast app and leaving a nice review. You can find me on Instagram at moneybackmorley. Today's episode was produced by Rachel Briggs, sound design and mixing by Elliot Lampitt, and the series producer is Giles Gear. Ta-ta for now, sausage.